Cool. All right. So I want to thank everyone for coming out today. Just so we get a feel for the audience, thought we'd start with a couple questions. Can you raise your hand if you are currently just exploring AR, VR, haven't actually developed any content? Can you raise your hands? All right. How many of you are in the middle of developing content but haven't actually shipped anything yet? Cool. And how many of you actually have content out in the market being distributed today? Nice. How many of you, and a little commercial, how many of you are using Unity Analytics for those of you out in the market? All right. I need to talk to the rest of you guys, okay? So we're all here today under the simple premise that I think has been carried through the entire conference, which is we're all believers, right? We all believe fundamentally that AR, VR, MR, let's just say VR for short, is going to change the world. Magic is possible through this new medium, right? I think we also all believe that the challenges ahead of us will be daunting, right? It's unknown. A full commercial platform hasn't even been shipped on it, and we're being asked to figure out what the actual business models, content strategy, things are such that we're actually on the cutting edge and not left on the bleeding edge, right? And so I think our hypothesis is that through data about what's actually happening in the industry today, data about patterns and platforms that we've seen before and applying them to this, we can actually derive some insights that would be really interesting. So we thought we'd start off with this illustrative panel, introducing themselves, a little background, and maybe a word or two on what they think this industry looks like in the next 2 years. Tipatat?
Hello, everyone. Oh, sorry. My name is Tipatat Chennavasin. I am general partner and co-founder of the Venture Reality Fund. We're a $50 million fund based in San Francisco. We only invest in VR, AR startups. We've looked at probably over 2,000 companies in the space. We've made 18 investments. Some of our investments that you might have heard of include Alchemy Labs, Against Gravity, is the guys that make Rec Room, Mind Show, and a couple others. And where I think VR will be in 2 years from now, I think actually that's when we'll start picking up steam. Like, this whole gap of disillusionment, I think that's when the curve starts going up, and I think that's when there'll be enough familiarity with VR, and that we'll see a lot more, not just novel, but valuable use cases, especially in the enterprise.
My name is Stephanie Llamas. I work at SuperData Research. I head all of our immersive technology research as well as our games and gaming media research. And a big reason why I am so much a part of VR at these conferences and have kind of moved in a different direction than games is because of how much I believe in this medium and how much I think it will proliferate. But I don't think it's going to happen as soon as a lot of us want it to. And I think that we're at a point right now where we need to identify its importance, but understand that we need patience. So in 2 years, I think we'll have a lot of mobile headsets out there, but I think that PC is going to be costly still. Console is going to be still kind of finding its legs, and where we're going to really find opportunities for adoption is through enterprise, getting more and more headsets, high-end headsets in particular, in the hands of the folks who are not necessarily aware of VR in the same way that we are, or people who will have their own headsets are. So I think that in 2 years is when we'll start to see that real shift of growth in enterprise that then translates into adoption in areas that we didn't expect.
Perfect. Good afternoon. My name is Jacob Mullins. I'm with Shasta Ventures. We're a primarily Series A stage venture capital firm in San Francisco. We invested in Servios in 2014, so quite a while ago, and other representative investments of our fund. We invest across consumer and enterprise, not only in VR, but our Nest thermostat, so we do a lot in hardware, as well as Nextdoor, the social network, and others like that. I'm an entrepreneur by everything else I've done. I recently joined Shasta in the fall, and as a part of that, have been diving into VR to understand where the business models are specifically. Because I know as running a company and having employees and to pay salaries and clients expecting work, it can be very stressful. And so I also have a meetup called VR Tuesday where we get together once a month in San Francisco, and the focus of that is specifically on the monetization of the industry. So come join us at VR Tuesday sometime. And out of Shasta, we have a VR lab where we've had a number of enterprises as well as consumer and other groups that have come through, and always I'm asking about monetization. So I'm excited to be here and share a little bit more.
Cool. Thanks, guys, and Gal. So we thought we'd structure the presentation with a couple slides on data, just to spur discussion, but we'll let the discussion go anywhere that the panel wants to take it. We'll also reserve some time at the end for some questions, and depending on how good those questions are, there could be an investment check from one of these guys at the end of that. No promises. All right, so the data itself comes from Unity Analytics. It's the analytics system that's built into Unity itself. Through this service, this free service, you get performance tracking, behavior, all those other things. But we also take that data and aggregate it and try and help the industry understand data outside their four walls to make better decisions, right? And so that's why we're here today. The data set we'll look at is over the last 3 months, about 46,000 apps, 700,000 devices, 1 million downloads. Unity has a huge footprint, and I think it'll be illustrative of some of the trends that we see in the broader industry. The actual data is confined to just Unity games and Unity content today. So let's start with actual content selection, right? So if you're in the phase of thinking about what kind of content would be most interesting or most compelling today, this is what we see in the data in terms of installs. A power log of the top 10 in terms of mixture of content. Standard curve right here. I think if you actually look at retention on top of these installs, however, and you look at day one retention, which is the propensity to actually come back, every single thing in the top 10 is a game, right? So my question to the panel is, how does this form how we should look at the next 12 to 18 months, right? Before these other forms take off, and you're trying to build a business that could potentially be investable or sustainable, how should we think about what we want to develop and the implications of that going forward?
Sure. I'll take this real quick, or first, or take a stab at this. I think game is one way to look at it, but I think the other way to look at it is interactivity. And making sure like VR inherently at its best is an interactive medium, right? Like with 6 degrees of freedom, with room scale, with your hands. And I mean, Tilt Brush is a Unity program. I'm so surprised to not see Tilt Brush here represented as a, I don't know if you'd call it utility app or experience, but I know through like asking people in terms of daily use, what do they use VR for? And Tilt Brush continues to be the #1 answer that I get from a lot of people that use VR, more so even than gaming. And so I feel like understanding that interactive component and how important that is, and making sure that what you're building does have that retention stickiness is key.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it has to do also with definition, you know, the way that you're saying whatever Tilt Brush would be represented as. So, you know, on the research side, we've had a lot of back and forth about that. What's a game and what's an experience, and, you know, how do you define those? And we found, you know, the apps and the VR games that have been selling and retaining the most, things like Job Simulator. Is it a game? Is it an experience? Is it interactive? Like, what is the difference between that and something like a Call of Duty in, you know, non-VR? We're really finding that it's going to be not the games necessarily, or not, you know, the cinematic experiences or whatever. It's going to be those experiences, the interactive experiences, that we actually break that out as a completely different segment of VR when we look at the market from games, because VR, the key is that VR is not any other medium that we already have. It's a huge mistake to just look at it in the same lens of things that we already have, and therefore say, a movie would look really cool in VR, I'm gonna throw a movie in there. Well, movies, TV, film, all of that, it's a different animal completely. It's identifying VR's strengths, and it's what makes it unique, and then identifying the kinds of experiences that you want people to have with that without the sort of prejudice that you get from the other media that we're all used to.
Right, so those are the ranked by retention across our network. The top 10 are all.
They're all games, basically. That's the point.
But
Yeah.
but that kind of goes back to definition. Like, you know, what we consider a game might be more granular than here.
And in this case, this was self-selected by the developers themselves as to what category they put these in.
So I think in new emerging platforms, we have the opportunity to to reinvent a lot. I think we all agree that, and that's why we're in this room, because we think we can trailblaze here. But that said, we need to make money today. And the game business model is not a new model. It's been around for a long time, and there's some very large companies that have made lots of money at it. But we do have an opportunity to monetize today. So I would counsel, and when I talk to entrepreneurs, go make money today. And how do you do that? Like, the app stores and a lot of distribution platforms aren't advanced enough to allow, you know, in-game transactions, in-app transactions like mobile has. I'm sure it will come. But the main way you can do it today is by selling a license fee for that. And I wouldn't be scared of that. And there's a lot of entrepreneurs I speak with who say, you know, we're a consumer app, we're social, we want to just keep it free so we can get out there and get as many users. And I understand that, but in a world where there are a limited number of headsets, of fully featured headsets, maybe somewhere in the 500,000, my estimation, 500,000 to 750, there's just, that business model of the free works when you have tremendous millions and tens of millions. So I always counsel, consider charging at the beginning, make some money, help cover some of your costs. Also, it helps tell you what's good and what's not. Consumers are really good at self-selecting and what they vote with their wallet. So find something, build something that your users are willing to spend money for.
Cool.
Oh, I had one quick question about this data. I think one of the things too, does this combine mobile VR and full-featured VR?
It does, and we will cover that next as well.
Okay, I think that's very dangerous.
Yeah. So let's go to that right now. So breaking it up by console versus mobile. The initial data, if you look at it, is not surprising, right? Mobile, 66%, a lot of devices out there, much bigger investment on the console side. We also looked at session times broken up in the same way, right? And not surprising as well, session times are heavily weighted towards PC console. And it's a pattern that we saw traditionally in mobile gaming as that developed. However, over the last 12 months, we've seen actually that converge, where PC and console and mobile, even total session time, much less average session time, has really converged, right? So how do we think of this as an input into the decision making that we're doing as well?
Well, if I could just start. What I thought was actually interesting is that it was a little surprising that 66% was mobile, because it should be so much more if you think about how many headsets are out there.
And let me throw one caveat out there. Those applications have at least 100 downloads. So that throws out some of the lighter weighted experiences and content that's out there.
Right, exactly. And I think that's an interesting thing, because I think one thing is that a lot of people focus on cardboard. And so I'd like to remove that from this discussion as much as possible, just because, you know, we find in our research people try a cardboard about 3 times before they either stop using VR or they move on to a different type of headset. And I think that going back to, you know, that pie graph where you see 66% of the installs are on mobile really shows that people who are dedicated to VR will go to a higher end headset, and it's not necessarily about the number of headsets that are out there, it's about the type of user that you have, and those users are going to be a lot more active and a lot more engaged on PC, on console. Now, on the other hand, it's a lot more expensive, which I'm sure maybe you guys know more about, but then you also have people who are more willing to spend. So we find on PC and console as well. They're going to spend more, and they're going to spend more often. So but you have to offer an experience that's going to be long enough, engaging enough, and interactive enough that it's going to keep them in their headsets and entertained and be sticky, to the point where when they spend $20 and they do experience your experience, they're happy about that experience, as opposed to on mobile, where if you're doing something a little bit lighter or a little bit more experimental, you can charge less, and there's more a margin for error that people expect a little bit.
Can we go back to the previous slide? About one more. Oh yeah, perfect. So things like this drive me insane. And I think these are actually very dangerous, because market share by installs means nothing to a struggling startup right now trying to monetize. What they really want to know is market share by consumer spending, or market share by revenue, right? And I mean, it's hard for you guys to get that data, so I'm not trying to be disrespectful. But what I'm trying to say is, if we look at just on Steam, right? That's the only place where we can get any kind of data insights onto revenue sales, because they have this crazy website called Steam Spy. And it's, plus or minus like 5 to 10% accurate. But as the numbers get bigger, it becomes more accurate. And what we've seen is on just Steam VR, where there's the Vive, probably addressable install market of like 300 to 400,000, because we don't include China in the Steam sales. Then we're seeing at least 12 to 13, at least 12 companies that have done over $1 million in software revenue. Direct to consumer, the proper like old school business model of build something great and people will buy it. That's awesome. That's phenomenal. And then you look at something like mobile with 60% of market share, 5 million installs. I can only think of maybe 1 or 2 companies that have done over $1 million in revenue. And so, one, I think, and this is kind of what you're alluding at, but like one high-end VR user is worth 1,000, 10,000 mobile users, and it's kind of this. I came from mobile and social gaming, and we're always looking for whales. We're never trying to make penny off of billions of users. It was always trying to find the whales that would spend $10,000, $100,000 a year in your weird clicking game, and so what the Vive community has done great, or what high-end VR has done great, is it's really created that pool of whales, and now it's about finding the right ways to monetize and unlock them. And so I would tell people, if you're a developer right now and what you're developing for, mobile VR right now just doesn't make sense. And really focus on Steam and Oculus and the high-end VR. That's where you're going to find the biggest opportunities.
Yeah, I'd just echo that. Also, the panel right before this in this room was the Unity folks chatting about their advertising opportunities that are kind of coming down the pipe and how they're working with IAB on the ad standards. And I think that's where, when you see the session times on retention, you see that's telling you that people are really excited about spending time in there. So, the monetization opportunities that come to me are in-app purchases. As that evolves, now you can do some downloadable content, new maps and whatnot, but also advertising and branded experience inside them. So I think these will all evolve, but let's not forget, like, what Oculus's first birthday just passed, right? These devices, we're still very early. We all know this, and these business models will evolve. So think about, how can we stay scrappy? How can we make money today off your application where the people are, and then build for the future, which is in-app and ads.
Cool. So extending that same concept from engagement, high-end engagement, we'd love to get the panel's thoughts on geography. Right, so obviously the U.S. has been the center of much of it. We've heard much from China. When we look at our data, it does reflect that, right? There is a strong Western bias, though we see a lot of growth in Asia currently. And once again, if we are looking for those high-end experiences, surprisingly, it doesn't map to the power curve exactly. There is strong engagement, stickiness, retention from very loyal audiences around the world, right? So traditionally in gaming, it could be soft launch territory, things like that, exploration. But how does the panel kind of think about this data and use this for kind of decision making?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of it, when I see the China number, that I just think, oh, arcades. It kind of goes first in my head, which isn't necessarily a bad way of distributing your content and making money on it if you can publish it correctly and get license fees for it, which you can't really today, so that's another business opportunity. I mean, I think it's great. I think it's distributed as far and wide as possible. I think this is a great chart to see. I don't have a lot of insights other than that.
I mean, I think also part of this will be based off how VR is proliferated. Like, it's not even available in most of these other countries at scale, like the Vive or the Oculus only started releasing in like Korea, like in the past month, or in these other territories more recently. And so we're going to see that adjust over time. But I think the sticky factor was really important in the fact that, again, it's across the board culturally, people love VR if it's available to them. And now it's really just about getting more and more availability to VR. The other thing too that could influence this also is the price of VR. Like I remember one Australian developer complaining to me, and he's like, after like the import tariffs, buying an Oculus Rift is like $3,000 for the headset itself, or something crazy like that. And it was just insane. And so I think there's going to be an adjustment of all of this over time.
And we've touched on it already, but I think obviously the question at hand is how do you build a sustainable business, right? Where does monetization come from, whether it be ads, whether it be IAP? As the panel pointed out, we don't actually have good data on that yet, though we do have an IAP product that'll be rolling out. So what we did was actually looked at where monetization has happened outside of AR and VR. Right, so this isn't data we've actually shared in the past, but in the Unity ecosystem, these are the categories that actually monetize well on a per spender per month basis, right? And just to overlay so it's easier to look at, these are traditionally the gaming categories. This is everywhere else. But you see social and business, right? And the apps that we see in there are like Rent a Lawyer, which are experiences that could potentially transfer well. So talk to us about monetization. Talk to us about really the nitty-gritty of what we should be thinking about and what we should actually do on a day-to-day basis to either take advantage of this information or information that you guys have.
Well, I think the first thing is the categorizing as games is interesting, but I by no means think that these category of games are right for VR right now. So I wouldn't use this list to decide what kind of game you're putting on VR. Because of just the fundamental differences in demographics. I think demographics is going to be a really interesting, important thing for everyone. So for instance, casino games. Casino games, it's about 65, 70% women, mostly over the age of 30. I mean, you don't really think about that when you think of traditional games. About half of the revenue for social casino games come from Facebook. It's the only game category that's the case. I mean, basically, this is just an anomaly of anomalies of games, right? And so if you are looking for a woman who is over 30, who is interested in a game and is willing to spend money and all of those sorts of things, then that's important more than the fact that it's a casino game. So something that we've tried to do and that we're looking at a lot closer than when VR was very, very early, is that the actual demographics of not only the people who are on the platforms, but the people who are looking to buy or be on those platforms. And so when you do think of a game, or you do think of social or business, or any of those sorts of things, you're thinking of the person. You should be thinking about it as, who am I accessing, and how, and why, and through what. So then you go down to strategy games. We're talking about younger males who spend, at different frequencies. There are many more users on a strategy game than a casino game, but the average revenue per paying user is smaller. So it's, again, not necessarily the classification of the type of app. It's who is it that you're specifically accessing, how do they spend, how do they they use VR, and that's sometimes very different from how they use non-VR. So for instance, we found that women who are over 35 who do use VR, they tend to use someone else in their household's VR device, and they spend a lot less than any of the other demographics, but they're a lot more okay with ads. So they're not annoyed by ads in the same way that the other demographics are. So if you're looking at that particular demographic, you're looking at a game or entertainment or anything like that, that's an ad opportunity in the simplest way, and just showing them an advertisement as opposed to having someone experience an advertisement like a young male would, you know, in terms of monetization. So I guess it's not a one-to-one relationship, I think, from this kind of list to what it is that you're creating and who you're trying to access and how much you're trying to make.
I mean, for me, the advice I give to startups when we're talking about monetization, and just think about the stage of the industry, right? Like I mentioned, there are teams that have made, $1 million or $2 million off of their VR title, even $3 million off of their VR title. But that's actually where the stage of the industry is. Now is not the time, if you're an indie developer, to try to budget a $5 to $10 million game production for VR. Right now is the time to think about 300 to 600K game budget, and then making $1 million to $2 million off of that, and using these things that are available to you, whether it is publishing deals from the major platform guys, but also things like early access, where you can actually get your minimum viable product out there, see if it has some kind of market traction before you start investing more resources, right? Thinking about taking the best of running games as a service or games as a platform, and not just building these packaged good games that were coming from a broken model. So don't try to say, hey, we're going to give you 30 hours of content for $60. Think about, okay, how can you actually build something where people are going to play it every day, come back to it, and then you might be able to make $10,000 off of this person in the lifetime of a user. But the enjoyment that they're getting out of it because it's a part of their everyday life is totally worth it and valid. The other thing too, I'd say, is don't just focus on gaming. Like we've been talking a lot, and that's the kind of the data that's out there. But we've talked to many startups in the enterprise space that are building solid multi-million-dollar businesses, curing or solving real-world problems using VR, whether it's in healthcare, whether it's in heavy industry. I think there's just a lot of opportunity that's out there.
What are you guys looking at when it comes to investment criteria, right? Are you looking at monetization? Are you looking at sustainable businesses? Or are you looking at other directional metrics or things and making bets that way?
Yeah, I look, and I spend all day looking at VR and AR companies. I'm looking for a product that demonstrates that the users love it. They just love it. And I'll look, of course, at the reviews on Steam, but I'll go into the Discord rooms. I'll spend time on Reddit. And you see some of these applications where the community is just vibrant around it. It's electric around it. And if you look at the absolute value of the concurrent users in a given 24-hour period of time, you're going to be very disappointed. So don't look at that. But look at what the kernel opportunity is. And so spend time, build something that you like, build something that somebody is willing to buy, and then build something that people that creates a community.
Cool. So we got a couple minutes left. If there are questions in the audience, please come up to the mic and don't be shy. There's a mic right there if you want to roll up to it.
Thank you very much. This question is for Jacob. So what are your opinions on location-based, and what would be the number one thing that you would recommend if we're looking to monetize that?
As a location-based operator?
As a location-based entertainment experience center.
I actually think it's a really interesting business model. I think it cash flows really nicely. I think it takes the form of almost like a private equity model, but not necessarily a venture capital model. And the difference there is venture capital is looking for this exponential growth, ridiculously hockey stick, while private equity tends to be more sustainable growth over time. Because of the location-based limitations of physical retail space, you can't do the hockey stick approach, but I think it's a great way to monetize floor space of malls, casinos, underused real estate right now. So I think it's a really interesting business.
I'm going to be controversial and disagree with you. I do agree with the scalable business, but I think it's actually a terrible way to monetize space unless you solve the throughput issue. Right now, most VR arcades, they're set up and they're taking up all the space because you need room still. You put one person at a time in this like 5 to 10 minute thing, and it's like, how many people can you really get through these experiences? Even when you scale up to these like person experiences like zero latency or the void, you're talking about, oh, at best, maybe we can get like several hundred people through in a day, where, if you're talking about major theme parks, they need thousands of people an hour to go through this to make the monetization work. So unless you can create an experience that's so good that you can charge someone $100 a ticket, I think you're gonna have some issues. So you got to really just tweak that like price point and throughput issue.
And that's where the venture capital model, I agree, doesn't work. But talk to a real estate guy about the monetization per square foot, and they're pretty excited.
Right. So build it at scale is what you're saying.
Well, I would say solve the throughput issue and just think about that and make sure that because time and time again when we looked at location-based, that tends to be the hurdle.
Thank you.
Hi, great panel. Thanks for sharing numbers. This is Nicole Zaro from Zio Design, Zio Play, follow the White Rabbit. Recently read an article on Netflix, how they're doing, how they're gathering data about where the appeal of a particular genre or recommendation was based much more on taste than on gender and age and these other classifiers. I was really curious about a methodology. Here we have a black box. We don't know what's going to be good in VR. I was curious if any of your firms are taking that approach in addition to kind of a classic 1950s segmentation by biology.
That's an awesome question because I love Netflix and the way that they look at consumers and the way that they look at how consumers are consuming on demand, and therefore they can kind of curate that experience, which I think VR is part of this like new era of curation, of self-curation. And so when we've done studies, we've seen some really interesting correlations. We find that males over 35 and female millennials, they watch very similar things. They like similar things, even though one pays a lot higher and makes far more. The other one pays for a lot less and is more mobile-centric. So we find these interesting differences, but then these alignments. And so what the only thing that makes that difficult and throws a wrench into it is the fact that games are such a huge part of VR. It's hard to parse out the nuances in those experiences that people will like, because then you get the biggest base, which is males, under 35 who play console and PC games, and there's a correlation there. But we do find that there's more of an egalitarian, I think, experience, the more and more that we try to access people who have equal opportunities to try the device. Because that's the other problem, is the opportunities to try the device, who's getting to try them and what they're getting to try. So, yeah. Yeah,
and so it seems to me that there's an opportunity with AI to start pulling in the different keys on different, genres or tastes, by using that as we're looking at more and more experiences and what the times and stuff are.
Yeah.
But I also think it's kind of early in this industry to really start thinking about like segmentating the audiences, and I think right now VR has to be for everyone.
It's the opposite. It's not segmenting the audience. It's designing what the genres or how VR can be an expressive medium in what sort of ways.
Sure. I don't think that decision should be data driven. I think it really has to be done by example. It's like what we really need right now is that kind of innovation that doesn't come from necessarily looking at this, but like designing those experiences that when you do it, you're like, oh my God, this is the best thing I've ever seen, and I got to do it again. And like the first time you did Tilt Brush, right? Like where they think, oh, we need to target 40-year-old females that love kittens. Like, no, and I think the best thing about VR is that it reaches in and touches something primal and childlike in all of us and reawakens that experience that transcends these ideas of some of this stuff. And I think if we can build more of that and less of like, oh, we know VR is going to be gamers and male, so we have to build more gun simulating, shooting, deathy things, I think that we'd be in a much better place.
Because then you're just going to attract the same kind of consumer over and over.
With the same expectations they have on a console consoles, and you can't get that kind of fun. It's new kind of fun on the new platform. So
It's the problem games had for a long time until we started to make them more open. And
So maybe next time you do the panel, a slide like innovation and transcendence up there. Thanks.
Thanks. All right, I think we got 2 questions real quick, and we can get through these.
Hi, so a lot of this was talking about virtual reality. I was wondering what your thoughts on monetization of augmented reality, particularly with like mobile augmented reality. There's been a lot of news about that recently.
I was just telling Tipatat, one of the most exciting things I think that just happened was Facebook's opening of the camera effects platform and AR Studio. I think Snap has demonstrated that there is at least $200 million worth of advertising and marketing spend into some sort of face filter and intelligence to a certain extent. And now Facebook's opening that up to a couple billion users. So I think it's a huge opportunity. I think that brands and marketers are going to try to reach people where they are. And is that the camera? That's what a lot of these companies are now saying. Amazon just launched a camera. Pinterest has a camera now. So I think building AR, whether they're 2D or 3D experiences on the camera, is a pretty near-term way of monetizing. Really interesting.
Cool. One last question.
Yeah, you had a couple of slides about the share of installs. Like one was 34%, PC console 66. What was the actual volume of installs?
So the volume of installs was about a little over 1 million.
And that was in the past 3 months?
Yes.
And on this current slide, do you have any of the leading titles available that you can mention, either in health and fitness or in books?
That's probably data I can't actually share.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you to the panel. It was an incredible comment.
Thank you, guys.